All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Patch Notes podcast, your hot takes, your one-stop shop for esports news, gaming patch notes, and the occasional interview or two. This is the second episode of our hot takes, where we take 10 to 15 minutes to break down some really small announcements in the games that we love. Today, we're gonna be doing Rainbow Six, and as always, am your host, Alex, aka Overlord, and I'm joined today by Thunders. He is the captain of our comp team. He is also our IGL, and he has been working with us on our comp team. So, Thunders, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
All right, well, as they say, let's get into the patch notes. So, one of the first things we are talking about is, of course, the major Tachanka rework. You know what? I know that a lot of people have been very excited about this for a long time. What were your feelings like going into this?
My feelings going into this, I started playing Siege at a young age, but I kind of liked how they kept the lore in the background of the operator, right? But they made it to where they changed him so he could play in the current meta, and that's what you always want with a game like Siege. Is as the game gets older, maybe some of your base operators get tweaks and changes or overall overhauls like we saw with him, so that they keep him more relevant.
You know what? I could not agree with you there more, Thunders. And I think that that is something that is very important as Siege gets older. I mean, I think we're in what, year 5, year 6 now? So
Yeah, we're in year 5.
we're in year 5, so we are definitely getting, almost halfway, I think, through the lifespan of Siege. I think they said they wanted to keep it going 10 years after launch. So, it was really about how do we keep those original operators fresh and new and viable in the competitive scene. So one of the first things we saw from the Tachanka rework was, of course, that his turret is now no longer mounted and ready. It is, or mounted and loaded. It is just loaded and in his arms. He is now able to pick it up and use it as a gun. But it also has some soft destruction too. So I'm really curious as to what the competitive viability of Tachanka is going to be now with a primary that's not a shotgun that can do that much damage to the walls and be such a viable tool for opening up sites. What are your thoughts, Thunders?
My thoughts on it is just off the base of it, I feel like he's a really good operator for making rotates and stuff, but I feel like the LMG or the DP-28, which is still an LMG, is going to hinder mobility a lot. And I think that's the trade off on why they didn't consider making him a 2 speed, is that you always want to trade off for better guns, slower movement, right? So I think the problem there becomes, how do you balance it enough to where it does just enough damage to people, but then still makes the rotates? And they did it the right way because they kept the DP-28, which has a low rate of fire. Your higher damage guns you want low rate of fire on, but so they won't do as much damage. But then the problem becomes bullet penetration. We've seen the bullet penetration as through walls now, and with the new ping system we recently got in Siege, it makes it easier to take gunfights through walls, which means this gun looking through even long range engagements can look to be a monster if it makes it to live build like it currently is.
You know what? I agree with you there, and certainly some of the footage we've seen from the test servers would seem to suggest that what you're talking about is true, that it does pack indeed a very heavy punch as far as bullet penetration goes. And I liked what you mentioned there about, the whole idea of trading off that speed for the more damage, for the more viable gun, the more deadly gun on attack or on defense rather. But yeah, you are right. It's a very interesting trade-off, and it's very interesting to see how they've been handling it, especially with that ping 2.0 system. I believe in the new patch, they made it so now whenever you get pinged or whenever something gets pinged in your vicinity, you'll receive a ping from wherever it came from, and it'll get louder and louder as you get closer to that. And what do you think the effect of ping 2.0 has been kind of released, what we've seen? How powerful is it in
I,
this
I
latest
think
rendition?
I think off the top, a lot of people are like, "Oh, this is busted." IQ and Valkyrie kind of aren't needed with it. Um, I think to the contrary on this. I think Valkyrie and IQ are even needed more now. You go for your Z pings, or what's now known as ping 2.0, and you can ping objects. So let's say you're pushing an area and you put an IQ on the roof of cafe or even consulate. Really shallow maps you can see 2 or 3 floors down into. Kind of what people do with Pulse on basement on constant. With IQ and Valkyrie, you can ping these objects or where attackers are pushing from and give your team more intel. And we all know Siege is a team game, but there is a large and vast majority of the player base who plays on console and solo queue and duo queuing, and that gives them more freedom to communicate with their team. There's a vast majority of the player base who doesn't use any microphones or headsets to communicate. So at the competitive level, it's very good. It helps with extra coordination, but it grows the game at the public level and at the base level to help communicate, and it also brings in newer players to understand how the game works more. You know, we had the previous ping system where you get pinged and it wouldn't show it on the kill cam, and you're like, "Oh, how'd I die here?" You know, that can be really frustrating to newer players coming in to playing a game that's 5 years old. But now with the ping system being instituted into kill cams when you die, and it can help communicate it, it feels like it's much more open to help people understand how it was in competitive before and how it is in competitive now, because it helps us in competitive coordinating now. And yes, in competitive it doesn't help us out a lot because we've always pinged things based on the z ping or the yellow marker that we could, but now it helps the base community understand what it feels like when we're playing it from our perspective.
You know what? I certainly agree with you there, and I think that it will give the public more less competitive base kind of an idea of what we're working with in competitive Siege. Now, I know you talked a little bit about the Z-Ping and how that's been kind of the basic tool from the beginning, especially for people who are solo queuing or duo queuing on console or even on PC. You know, solo queuing and duo queuing is something that for newcomers can be a very frightening experience, to say the least. What with everything being such a team-oriented game and communication is really vital. I mean, the entire reason why we have teams, we don't just have single players who are insane. I mean, we do have Bolo, but disregarding Bolo as an outlier in the data set, a majority of this is a team-based game around communication and making sure that everybody's on the same page. And I think you're right. I think those soft secondary pings have definitely made the game a lot better. Now, back to Tachanka, because we kind of got a little bit sidetracked there. But the next thing that we are going to be looking at, other than his DP28, I believe it was, LMG, is his grenade launcher. Now, this is probably what has upset people the most and what has labeled him as too OP in the eyes of people like Bikini Bodhi, Gregor, just anybody in the Siege community clearly has seen that he is so broken in that regard because, for those of you who don't know, his grenade launcher has 10 grenades and each do, I believe, 5 seconds of area denial each, which would make him more able to cover more time than Smoke. Smoke can only get about 30 seconds worth of area denial, whereas Tchanka
Yes.
can get 50. So what are your
Yes.
thoughts on that, Thunders?
My thoughts on this is at a certain point, you have to limit what it can do. Maybe take four of it away, or four launches away, so he has six, and it's about 30 seconds to keep it in line with Smoke because we don't want a lot of power creep. And in the terms of him getting the new gadget, it's not like it's an old gadget getting reworked. It's a brand new gadget into the game, right? And so you have to think about it of power creep of order operators in that way. And as our smoke player, our team captain, and IGL on our cop team, a smart smoke can make it last about 45 seconds. If he's playing close with his kit, he can deny an area for about 45 seconds. But the problem with that is smoke's gas grenades are inconsistent, and you don't always take damage from it, and they don't always block areas. So that's how it's kind of balanced. But with Tachankas, it's you throw fire down, you get burned. It's there regardless. You can't move it. It's not a thing like CS:GO where you can throw a smoke in and it'll put out the fire and you can run through it. It also has a lot of balancing issues with spawn peaking on maps. I don't believe they actually put like ceilings to where they'll actually hit and come back down. I believe the red markers are there in the prep phase, so you can't shoot it out of the map. But actually, as soon as attackers spawn, if you get right angles, you can hit most spawns on even most competitive maps with that. Which thankfully it's illegal to do in competitive play because it's known as spawn rushing. But just for the casual and ranked community, it's very frustrating because not only is it competitively viable that you can't get through somewhere for 50 seconds, you can get fire and damage and spawn, and then you don't have something to neutralize it on the attack side, right?
You know what? I certainly agree with you there, and I didn't even really think about that or cover that because I believe when they initially released it, they showed a Cali almost all the way out back in shipping docks on Clubhouse getting flushed out by one of those fire grenades, like 40 some odd feet out of the building, which doesn't really seem to encourage or discourage rather spawn peeking or spawn rushing or spawn killing. which is often seen as a cheap tactic and one that's kind of the scummy way out of a gunfight. But honestly, I just have to wonder if you brought a Goyo, a Smoke, and a Tachanka at that point, how much time could you really deny? So you've got the 30 seconds with the Smoke, you've got the 50 seconds. That's a minute 20 right there. Throw in the
Yeah,
Goyos and throw in, just about any other trap operator, and you're looking at a really deadly combination there, yeah?
yeah, you're looking at a really deadly combination, and definitely it becomes the problem where you look on attack where they can bring a whole bunch of flashbangs, a whole bunch of grenades, and concussions, and even capital fire bolts. And this is people asking the question, where is our attack version of Jaeger, who is some sort of gadget they can set on a flanker they carry on them on a person that will catch those projectiles? Because for all matters, nitro cells are like almost like they have like a 15% success rate on detonation. So those aren't the biggest problem. But the problem now becomes, you have impacts being thrown at you, fire grenades and smoke grenades, and defenders have all that to. Defenders have the gadgets to counter attackers' throwables, but where's the attacker's gadget to counter the defender's throwables? Because and we're already in a meta in comp play known as a 20-second meta, um, where you have to burn utility, burn utility, burn utility, and push and hope on a whim and a prayer in the last 20 seconds that you get a good pick or a good line of sight so you can plant. So imagine what this does now when you say a whole avenue for the last 50 seconds, he can he can block off, and you also have to put into account that he can make rotations. He's a very high damage gun and he's a 3 armor, meaning his survivability is very high. He looks pretty busted on paper at this point. Now we won't know until we get to play him in the live build and how he'll interact. But I believe the problem is I don't think he's competitively viable at the top level, but I think he's more frustrating to play against because they haven't instituted a ceiling where if you shoot it out of the map during the action phase, it'll just bounce back down. There's a lot of games, like even in CSGO, and this became big in COD, where you take a frag, you throw it over the map and get a kill. Well, they started instituting in COD, and CSGO got the same idea from there. There's actually a ceiling that you can't throw anything higher than, and that it'll come back down, or just, take it out completely, like they did with Valk cams. When Valk got her buff, or projectiles in general, when you would throw them, there's a certain ceiling or height that they won't go past. And I think that's what you need here. And I think that you need to nerf him a bit for how many he can have, because we certainly can have somebody stacking on top of a meta that a lot of very good competitive players say is already a problem.
You know what? I certainly agree with you there, especially when it comes to that 20-second meta that you mentioned earlier. It has become such a frustrating notion in both comp. And then now you're talking about the idea of a Jaeger on attack, and that's something that I think the scene has wanted to see for a long time now, and even more now with 10 grenades and 50 seconds of area denial. It might be something that is seriously worth it for Ubisoft to start considering. Now, we are down to like our last 2 minutes. We're trying to keep it in the 15-minute mark. I know episode 1 was a bit overextended. But I wanted to take these last 2 minutes to focus on the withstand ability for Tachanka. Now, to be honest, that is what a majority of the casual fan base was like, whoa, that's got to be the overpowered part. But really, I don't really see a difference because 9 times out of 10, if you down a Zofia, the odds that she actually gets to use that withstand ability are so exceedingly rare that it doesn't really matter. And those withstand abilities should really be reserved for other operators, I think, that maybe aren't as strong on their own or aren't as strong maybe as roamers. I would love to see the withstand ability maybe on a roamer who could somehow pick himself up. Maybe we could see it in a next Oryx buff.
Right, right. I would believe it would be amazing to do, but to give it to specific operators, you would need to make tweaks. When I remember when Ella and Zofia came out on launch, when we both got them, we were like, cool, they have unique abilities, that are really institutional. Ella can detonate the concussion, Zofia can withstand, and those were unique to them. I think where that is a lot of a problem with casual people who play the game for lore, who play it for fun, who like to see the uniqueness of operators, see that it's overpowered, is that they took something and just smacked it on another operator, which is, something the Siege community is notoriously mad at, even when we knew Wamai and Cade were coming. When they seemed a little busted, we said, no, 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 you can't clash with other operators, make them unique enough. UBS went back and said, okay, we'll either tweak the type of gadget it is or their type of unique ability. And that's fine, we can do that. I think the withstand isn't a problem when you're playing in the casual community, because most of the times you're going to confirm that kill. But at a high level community where he can take a gunfight through a wall, down a guy, and kill another one, and then let's say, fire off an area for 50 seconds and withstand while they can't push him, then that becomes a problem. I don't think individually for other operators all these abilities are problems, but I think when you stack together the damage, the viability of his gun, and the 50 seconds along with the withstand, that gives him literally a kit that rivals the best operators in the game. And it's shocking to see an operator who's a meme, who's kind of a god figure, turn around and literally become the said god of Rainbow Six. So that's why I think it's shocking to get this. And I think the withstand ability, in my opinion, should be taken away just because it's a unique ability on an operator.
You know what? I think that I personally couldn't have said it better, and I think that that is a perfect summation of the overall reaction to Tachanka's rework. Is he's gone from a meme as the Lord or the God to becoming an actual God in the game. Like he's become so overpowered in his own right now that it's like, okay, the joke's over. We've got an actual comp scene where we have to balance our operators, and we're just
Yes.
not seeing that from Ubisoft. They're treating it, to me, it almost seems they're treating it more like a joke than they are, a
Well,
serious
that
balancing out.
Well, then the devs have come under fire for balancing the game for a casual and competitive scene, like most competitive games will be. But when you have both the casual community and your competitive community saying this is not right, obviously there's a problem with what you're doing, and I think they need to listen and take that into account when they balance him before we get him on live build.
You know what? I think that is probably the appropriate step that Ubisoft needs to take. And you know what? I hope they watch this video, and I hope that they take this into account or listen to the podcast, and that they really do take that advice to heart, because it seems like everyone really really wants that right now. All right, this has been the Entity Esports Hot Takes for the Patch Notes podcast. This has been our second episode. I am, as always, Alex, aka Overlord. I was your host. I was joined today by Thunders, captain for our comp team. And
Yeah, not a problem. Thanks for having me.
yep, thank you for coming on, and we will see you all in the next episode.